Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 345 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to build our U-234 reactors, process the U's MOX fuel, and upgrade our solid fuel production. Enjoy. I guess I'll just manually take all these shells and dump them in here, because I think we already have a dumping point for shells right here. Yeah, 960 of them, so we already have a sufficient supply. So I will turn off logistics. And oof. Actually need to dump all my inventory into something. Here we go. And I guess I'll just put the shells in every chest that's available here. Just so they get sucked up, because man, they take a lot of space. Okay. Of course, they're just turning them into different types of shells, but these ones stack much more densely. And we're making a bunch of explosives, but explosives we can deliver. So we can actually make an active request for this. It'll eventually clear through those. Oh, there's a tiny little blank zone, like right here. But anyway, pollution cloud is continuing to shrink. So let's dump explosives back here. It looks like that's where our passive provider chest is, but we probably don't need that there now. Let's say the input priority is on the right here, which will allow us to do a buffer here. And I think it's 2400 because they stack in units of 50. And we're going to have a whole bunch of explosives here, but hopefully the rest of them can fit in this spot, and if they don't, we'll deal with it later. Okay, well, the plutonium reactors should basically be set up. We're just going to have to wait for us to both run out of plutonium 235 and the associated fuel cells before plutonium will work properly. But we have one more set of reactors to build, and that's for 234. And on average, we calculated that we would essentially need roughly 4 reactors. It's a little less because we took some productivity modules out. And the way that it works is going to be similar to our other uranium reactors. The numbers are going to be similar, and it's going to turn on and off in similar ways as well. The difference being we only need one of them. But we should still have a sufficient amount of performance in our ducts to put one more on the end. We just got to make sure none of the wires cross. And that's fine, because we can just manually remove them there. But I suppose we actually need to still flip on the power switches for all of these. I accidentally turned that one on, but whatever. That should be all of them. Let's pull these out, because now we need to make the new requests. This time for 234 cells. And let's flip the power switch to off so we can configure it. It's largely the same, but now it's looking at slightly different fuel cells. But the concepts are quite similar. It's just the fuel cells have less fuel in them, so the inserters will have to swing more often, but the power output is going to be the same. It's just worrying about the reactors overheating is going to be much less of an issue. See, we got to make sure it doesn't connect on any side. Hopefully the zone is still good. Oh, come on, really? That small? Fine. There. Problem solved. Well, when determining if we want to connect this, we're basically looking for the A signal, which does so happen to be right here. And this is technically a situation where it takes power to make power, but that won't be much of an issue. We can just pre-seed it here, because this is a byproduct burner and it's not particularly important that it runs immediately, because it's really not that much power. So in the end, it doesn't make much of a difference. It's just a byproduct we're trying to get rid of. We've just got our combinators here. Connect the A wire. And also power switch itself, which I believe runs on a green wire. And then connect that in. So it was 15% for the plutonium and 30% for the 235, and the 234 being a byproduct should be even higher than that. So I think the only number remaining here is 45%. So if it's under 45%, it can connect, and then after it's above 50, it stops. And right now, that's not particularly the case. So we gotta let the accumulators go down a little bit here first. But once they connect, then we'll be able to basically let it warm up on its own. It's not particularly important. But the 234's got in there, and another resource access failed, so I really need to figure out what that is. And let's see, something is running to generate a lot of power. Well, it must be our fuel burners here. Yeah, believe it or not, that we're not even going to see this stuff activate because the rest of our burners are doing fine because the factory is only using a modest amount of power right now. Well, okay then. We can do this manually. We'll just fire these up, and it actually needs to heat up before we'll see anything. But we've watched reactors heat up a couple times now with this version 2 of the setup. So we'll just let it happen. While it is happening, there is one more thing we can do. And actually, let's use small poles for this, because oh, it's out of fuel already. They did not get very hot because there's just not that much fuel. So I'll put 2 in each one there. We need to grab this red wire, which does have the numbers we're looking for. Jump it across. Put our own combinator down. Copy the signal over, except now it's 234. And will that reach? Looks like it. So then they can cross, and it is outputting the correct signal. So we need one more of these. Connect it. And it looks like it's off already because these things just hold no fuel at all. Man. There you go. 3 for each reactor. Now that they're going, we get the 234 fuel cell there. But you can see that it chews through it pretty fast. At least compared to plutonium. Almost there to get rid of the flashing. Darn, it looks like it was just barely not enough. But there we go. Finally. But we can flip the switch to turn it on and let it get warmed up. And since it is above its set point, this won't run, but it will try to keep itself nice and warm for when it is actually needed again. So that seems pretty good. It looks like it's just about to balance out exactly at 800. But nonetheless, it should work fine. And we just gotta let this process go for a while. And actually, now I think about it, because I see that we have 49K of uranium, that probably messed up the control signals for just the various belts on our uranium setup. Because we probably don't want them directly connected like that. Okay, that got filled up properly again. This is kind of a temporary warehouse anyway, so we can probably just ignore its status. And actually, to make this a little easier to read, let's make that 24,000 and make these 23,000. Just so it makes a little more sense. What are we overloaded on? explosives. Of course we are. Okay. Let's do a warehouse then. Copy that right there with the stack inserter going in. Same signals, but we'll do a stack inserter going out and turn this into a regular chest. So now the robots will completely dump all that in there and it'll all be taken care of. Because it's not like we use explosives that often. Okay, well now we have one more step here. We have to process the MOX fuel cells. Because now we have a few of them to deal with. We can go to our existing line, and just say we have our output, which we turn that into mostly americium. And of course we get stuck with little curium, but what can you do? Requires one machine. It doesn't really need speed modules, so about efficiency and pollution cleaning. And that's all it needs. Although, it's defaulting to active beacons, which might be messing up some of these numbers here. Which is kind of bad. So maybe I should set the default to nothing. So that actually changes the numbers, which will change to the other setup as well. So, let's back this out. Please stop jumping, window. So, speed, 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 speed. And this other one got beaconed up. So we'll get rid of it, and that does tell us that we actually needed 2 of these after all. And of course this one, well, that one didn't get beaconed. This is not entirely accurate, which is a little annoying because we were just making use of the belts. Well, okay then. We'll have this combine and go up here, put these 2 with an input. It did seem like it was going a little slow. Oh, and they're also set to the wrong thing, which is funny. Because that needed to be mixed oxide each side. And let's just put that machine there with some long-handed inserters. And that should get that job done. Okay, well let's follow this to the end. The output that we care about is the americium. Does the input make sense? Essentially, yes. That we are processing the fuel cells. We're getting plutonium on the way out. So you can see that this process did breed us some plutonium, where the ingredient was 0.02 plutonium, and then on the way out we get 0.26, which is pretty big, but in the end it will have cost us 2.46 uranium. It's almost 10, so the ratio is much worse. But nonetheless, it still makes plutonium, so, and it does create some lead oxide, which that'll be interesting to deal with. So, of course, speed modules. And here's a setup, and it basically can feed into itself. Let's do it up here because we're going to generate plutonium, so we're going to want to send it down there. We can put these going this way and just kind of deal with things in a bit. It's a little complicated, but the fuel cells come in, and then when we process them, we're going to get basically 4 things on the way out. But in the end, it's not going to be very much of any of it. So we can put it on a belt and send it on its way. Different things will need to go to different places. It will produce the tiniest amounts of curium. So I'm guessing just a strong box will be good enough for this. Let's put it off to the side. Have output priority to the right. Pulling off the curium. And then again to the right for americium. And then it's slag and uranium going the other direction. One more thing here. 238 goes to the left, and finally the slag can go the long way around and eventually get to where it needs to go. And actually, let's use one requester chest. And we don't need to do corner inserters for speed, but in this situation, This will allow us to just pull from one chest. So everything mostly goes to where it needs to. So that pulls off there. But it also needs plutonium and uranium, which we're also getting from this belt right here. So we can totally just reuse it, which will turn everything back into useful resources. Oh man, look at that thing go. Except now we have the lead oxide, and what exactly, if anything, can we do with that besides just sending it to lead? Well, it goes into lead ingots with a little bit of carbon. But we need this in such small quantities that I don't think we really need to worry about it too much. So we can just insert most things back onto the belt here. Make it a blacklist. And make it the lead oxide that it can't insert on here. So everything else will be useful stuff. And then lead is all the way down here. And it doesn't even run using the process that uses lead oxide anymore. But the amount is so small that I don't think it matters. So we can just pull one of our blast furnaces here, like blast furnace 4, and honestly drop it pretty much right here, because I'm fine with robots doing this because the quantities on this are so small, 0.26 a second. So we'll have another output, copy it over, but make it where it's whitelist to be the lead oxide. Make it an active provider chest, and hey, power went below the set point of 45, so now the 234 reactors are running hard, and they'll basically just keep running pretty much until they run out of fuel, because they're basically fighting a losing battle against the accumulators, and it's only one set of reactors, so they really can't accomplish very much, and they'll eventually be done. Okay, this thing's back here. Let's do requester chest. I have no idea how fast this machine is, but it probably is pretty decent on its own. But let's just put stack inserters in there since we don't know. And how about we just request like 200 of each thing. And request from buffer chest, and looks like they're not receiving any. Do we not have them over here? No, I guess not. Because there's a buffer chest there, but that's a dump. Well, what's the most nearby carbon? It's down there. So let's just switch this to request 1,000 to make sure we never run out. And I guess we'll run a squiggly belt. Actually, it's not too bad, because it can just go straight through these machines up here and in. And the output is just lead ingots, and it'll fill that up as required. So I think that is everything we need to process the plutonium now. So let's make the request. Used up fuel cells. And they're on their way. And since curium is something we probably care about, even though it's not particularly important, but nonetheless, having it on our indicator here will be kind of nice. Man, we still don't have room for all that junk. We really made a lot of it. Well, the accumulators are almost to 30%, which means the normal uranium reactors will turn on now, and they will certainly not have any issue keeping us charged up. But there we go. They're running quickly. Doesn't take them very long to get through that. So the relevant resources get sent to where they need to go. And there we go. We got enough americium to make some plutonium, so now that process is going. No batteries. Well, that makes sense, because I think we turned that off to save power. But I guess we can turn it on now. But I kind of want to see this run, because It'd be nice to see a curium if possible. And it looks like we're sending plutonium the wrong way, where the output priority should have been to the right, and it should have been slag. There we go. That looks better. Well, no curium. But at this point, curium is both a byproduct and a rare resource, so it's to be expected. But it went through those pretty well. Just put some junk on the wrong belts, but it should be good now. So, is this like warehouse getting super filled? It actually is. It's at 17k already. And we have 14k of explosives left. So, oof. Well, let's do exactly the same thing. And space it one apart. And just let that keep filling up. Now our process for uranium and plutonium is, for the most part, circular. To the point where we won't really have to touch anything. It'll just work on its own. We don't have any curium yet in the warehouse, but let's just set it on the circuit HUD now. So if we get some, we will be able to see it and then celebrate. It's not that important. Not right now, anyway. We do need some curium to start doing thorium power, but clearly this is already plenty enough. So curium and curium. And we'll just let that go. Oh, hey, look, bluish greenish water. It's getting cleaner. And actually pollution in this general area is below 100. Before we get into this, I just want to check. What does the pollution cloud look like now? Getting smaller. So there's a couple of things we want to consider here. One is mineralized water and what we're doing with it. Because a major element to our factory's various processes, especially as it pertains to water treatment, is to make mineralized water as a byproduct. And for the longest time, I'm not sure exactly when, but probably around episode like 40 or something like that, we've been turning it into green algae and then turning that green algae into essentially plastic, but also other products like making paper here. And this is fine, but basically we've been using any excess mineralized water to make plastics products regardless if we need the plastic or not. And essentially what happens are all of these burners right here will just burn propane away, and it's super polluting, and it's just not very good fuel. In the process of messing around with C-Block, I kind of reminded myself about a certain recipe. So if we follow mineralized water, it doesn't go into that much, but it does go into a couple things here. Most of this is kind of like whatever. Essentially, green algae is the thing it goes into, but it goes into one important thing. Crystal slurry to mineral sludge. Prior to messing around with C-Block, I just saw this as an extra recipe to get rid of crystal slurry that wasn't necessary. But in fact, in C-Block, because you're so limited on resources that you'll find yourself with mineralized water that you don't know what to do with, well, you could make the crystal slurry specifically so you can get rid of the mineralized water, and that will create sludge, which in C-Block will allow you to make more efficient ores. But in our situation, we can turn that mineralized water into sludge and then crystallize it, which will help because we don't have any other way of making tungsten right now. So that would improve our tungsten production. And improving tungsten is probably a lot better than getting some green algae based free resources. But the other aspect of this are all of these cracking machines. And essentially they're cracking it down into methanol. So if you follow the process, it's residual gas getting cracked into synthesis gas, getting cracked into methanol, which gets cracked into propene, which can be turned into plastic, but it's usually burned. And is that a process we want to still follow? Well, synthesis gas itself goes into a lot of stuff, but if we have nowhere else to put it, probably the best thing to do with it is just turn it into solid fuel. So if we take some synthesis gas and a coke, which is 2.5 megajoules, we can get two solid fuels which is 24 megajoules on the way out. So 2.5 on the way in and 24 on the way out, at the cost of a little bit of synthesis gas. Seems pretty good. I would say that's a lot better than simply making, in this case, 80 methanol. And burning the solid fuel would be way better than propane because it's just kind of messy. So if we make this change, we really shouldn't need to burn propane for essentially anything. So let's follow the pipe for now and make sure it's not connected to anything special. I don't think that it is. It's just going in here. So we can make this change by just unhooking it and leaving propane in the pipes. They will attempt to fill up as necessary for plastic, but that's the extent of it. So that's a good use for this cracker. It will continue to do that, but now it's going to be overloaded on the synthesis gas. And who knows exactly how much we're going to have, but this one machine technically can take in 812, but that seems like an awful lot. So this machine is 450, that one's 450, so we'll see here. If we do solid fuel, that'll be from synthesis, 812. That's exactly 10 chemical plants, but speed modules exist, so now it's 2 chemical plants, and that'll make a whole bunch of solid fuel. And these can go anywhere, but we do want it to be in such a place that we can easily get coke in here, and we might as well use drones for this, and it might take a few of them, so let's just do 5. And it'll be a bit of a zigzag for drones to deliver, but it's probably not going to make this stuff all that fast. This is just the worst case scenario. And actually, we already have a supply depot. I'm kind of surprised. I'm wondering what it went into. But I'm not asking any questions. It's there. But I also do kind of want to shut down this thing from just burning a bunch of extras. And in fact, we basically don't need to have any of these north ones connected at all. Like, we don't need the logic. So for now, let's unhook it and unhook the pipe from the top, which will disconnect some of those. And we don't even need to have this logic here at all, so we can pull it out. Because basically we are unhooking our algae setup and essentially our dump of mineralized water from everything that's not strictly required to leave the maximum amount available to be turned into mineral sludge. So all of this was set to use all of the different methods available. But at this point, we don't really need this at all, so we can essentially unhook it by just removing the belt right here. And it's not running because filled on methanol gas and then filled on propane. So these will only run in order to make plastic. And that's it. We'll worry about those other belts later when they get empty. But we'll probably find ourselves filled up on mineralized water quite quickly. So any of the synthesis gas that isn't needed for methanol can continue out. But at the same time, we don't want these two methods fighting each other. Probably going to need a ton of top-up valves here because of the way this is designed. Hopefully flow rate isn't an issue. But we'll just drop these in. But it just fills up whenever methanol gas is below 80%, which will leave a little bit of space for this machine to run. But if it can't, then it will send its extras over here. And this would fit a little better if it was like right there. So one inserter goes in, and probably basically a stack goes out, like long-handed and a near, and it's kind of a red, so that's a lot of fuel block. But I don't think this thing's going to run very much, and solid fuel does stack in 50s. It's not that far away, so let's do a belt in the boonies here. And it'll just sort of zigzag in there. Although we might want to leave this here anyway in case other fuel blocks are delivered by drone. And that should be it for that setup. We won't really see anything for a while. But that gives us an alternate way of dealing with resources, and now we're not just going to have a ton of propane left over. So we probably get rid of these burners after a while once we make sure that this works and there's no issues. But it went up to 40% and stopped, because that's what the set point was. There was one other solid fuel recipe here that we can potentially do, and that's from methane gas, also by adding coke. We don't make a lot of it, but we are technically burning it away, and it would be better to turn it into solid fuel than just send it to a byproduct burner. Oh yeah, still gotta hook up those batteries. Might as well just do that now, because I'm pretty sure all those machines were updated with pollution cleaning, so it shouldn't be crazy. And seems like that train has run dry. Is it getting loaded? Nope, because we're out of something. Sodium hydroxide, and it's because one belt is the wrong way. But anyway, the main setup, that is dealing with extra methane gas, is here, and right now it's holding on to some in a storage tank, which is right here. And it used to be hooked up to a burner, but now it isn't, because it's waiting for methane gas to be high, and if so, it's cracking it into methanol, which does create residual gas, which helps this setup a little bit, but it's essentially been running itself just fine. It might be harder for it to run itself if we turn this off, but that would save the methane gas. So how much does this need? 67.5, so I'm guessing if we did solid fuel, 67.5 is not going to be very much. Nope. So just one machine. So we'll put it over here instead. It's hooked up to the same logic. We'll leave the machines here for now. And we have an awful lot going on here. We're not going to be dumping the methanol gas anymore. So that's one crazy pipe that can get removed, but we'll leave the machine there in case we still want it. So one of these is a supply, one of them is a request. And since this is a byproduct, let's put a limiter on there. The coke will zigzag its way in here and get input, and then the solid fuel will zigzag its way out. It's kind of out of the way. I suppose I can put it a little closer, but then we would have just had a pipe zigging around and kind of doing the same thing, so I'm not sure what would have been better. But anyway, that's connected, so now the methane will be turned into something useful as well. And how have we not gone through all of this stuff yet? It's so much. Because we have basically another full warehouse. It's like oil residuals all over again. So I guess another one. And how's our accumulator capacity going? Pretty good, we're getting higher. And it's whining about the batteries, but now they're actually running again. So it shouldn't have to wait too long. There was that one weird belt. Okay. Not much is happening right now because the factory isn't producing many resources. But we can pull this out and change how we have the gems hooked up, because we do have the process necessary to turn it into mineral sludge. We do have the old version though, using the filter frames. I'm not sure if the ceramic one would be any better. Let's see here. It seems like when you use ceramic filters, it costs the same amount of mineralized water, but less crystal slurry, but you also get less mineral sludge. Strictly speaking, from a yield perspective, it really seems like the coal version is better, really for both of them. Now you get less byproducts from ceramic filtering, but in this situation we don't want less byproducts, we want all the byproducts. Well, I'm not sure if these machines would be fast enough, so when in doubt, add speed modules. And then we have to look at the logic It's if mineral sludge is low or crystal slurry is high, which is essentially empty, and that's fine. But we have one more condition, and that's if mineralized water is available. So for smoothness, we probably want our own tank here, and since this is on a corner, probably makes the most sense to put it right there. So it'll be in close proximity here. And I think we were having a problem in the past with this set to lower than 40, so we'll leave it at 40. And it's fine, actually, if we take some of this crushed stone to turn it into mineralized water to then turn that into slurry. I'm not sure which one is technically the better way. Either way, it's fine. So one more here. The idea is the same, but now it's looking for mineralized water, and we want this to be a high level, so probably 80% or 60K. So if mineralized water is high, it can turn on, and it doesn't need to right now, but if it did, we would need crystal slurry to run, and right now they're empty because it's connected to these, and they do have logic that if crystal seedling is low, they turn on. So crystal slurry would come from the ore bus, and any of that we got, we'd want to process it immediately. So I think instead of basing this on the status of crystal seedling, it instead should be based on the crystal slurry tank. And it really doesn't need a pump. It can splash backwards. And in fact, the signal is already being delivered. So instead of seedling, it's slurry. And these need to be adjusted correctly. However, these will always try to run to fill up seedling, which honestly is probably fine, and I don't think it needs a pump either. That just goes down the way. We just need some space in the slurry tank for the ore bus. And presumably, if the ore bus is going, it means it's going to be making mineralized water, which thus can get processed away. But it's possible that we might need to force mineralized water on to make this work. But another on condition here. Well, the on condition is crystal slurry is above 10K. But instead, how about we have it at as above 40K. So if it ever gets overfilled, these will run, even if mineralized water is not particularly high, because it just needs to make room for the ore bus to put its resources in there. It seems like our delivery of gemstones is slowing down a little bit, but it only goes so fast. But I'm guessing we can make that a lot faster. We've got speeds, as well as faster belts. Those red stack inserters seem pretty good at this now. But nonetheless, it'll probably help them either way to crank this thing up to maximum speed. We have the technology, so we might as well use it. That's going pretty fast now. Wow, that's a lot of sulfur. Well, it's done. So it filled up the seedling tank to maximum. Crystal slurry to 10K, so these are ready to start yanking the mineralized water out of the system as required. The reactors are still going okay, and we have so much of the 234 that this thing is still going at full tilt. But statistically, this one setup will be enough. We just got real unlucky and then got real lucky all of a sudden, and now have hundreds of these cells to have to burn through, because there's actually none left in the machines. So what's at the reactors is all it's gonna get. And all of this has basically caught up as well. So from here, we're just gonna have to see how this works. That we changed a little bit of this setup, so something might get messed up. It's hard to say. But ultimately the goal is to try to convert all of that mineralized water into crystallizer products, of which our goal is basically tungsten. Ironically, it's trying to create tungsten right now because cobalt is just the lowest thing that it cares about, so it would try if it could. Well, the UPS slowdowns and the brownouts caused quite a bit of detour compared to what we were working on before, and I barely remembered what were we working on before. It looks like we were just doing some generic research here. Like we can do better furnaces, but we don't really need to worry about that until we're ready. We could do the better offshore pump because we obviously use those. There's tier 4 of resource refining, and eventually we'd want to get to that, but not right now. The tier 4 of pump and also tanks, that would be useful. We don't need to do the better puffers because everything's holding out right now. And we don't need better solar panels for our character. They would certainly help, and each one of them would be 120 kilowatts. And if we replace this, that would be 120 times 9. So it'd be a little more than a megawatt, but when we're standing on a panel, we get 20 out of this thing. And speaking of power, since we're running low and we're talking about stuff, we should probably stand on the panel. But we don't strictly need that stuff right now. The crawler got a bunch of components which we could upgrade later, but it may not be relevant ever again. Considering how hard this high tier stuff is to craft, we probably should just kind of ignore it for now. Although, giving it an overdrive engine and increasing its movement speed sounds good if that actually increases its top speed as opposed to its acceleration. Not particularly important right now. And that's basically that, so we were just going through any random stuff that we potentially could use before doing any other setups, now that we have blue circuits. Probably the next big setup is going down the chain to get our final tier 8 modules, which we do need a bunch of. But prior to that point, we should probably get a lot of this random stuff taken care of. How about the maximum tier of electric poles that uses gold wire and nitinol, and of course the previous tier, to give us some real big wire reaches. So sure, substations, same thing, but now we have our blue circuit boards which we can use in there. So sure, it's great to get the top tier stuff researched. We can do the same for a mining drill, and that will require tungsten carbide plates, which is an item that we haven't used yet. Sure. It's just so good that we're finishing up all of these chains. Water pump jack uses those blue circuits. So sure. Regular pump jack, same recipe. Sure. The top tier repair pack, similar recipe with tungsten carbide and blue circuits. I'm trying to basically get everything done except for robots, because I'm guessing we'll probably want to upgrade our robots before those tier 8 modules. I mean, the tier 8 modules would help with robots though, but I don't think they're going to be that big, because our setup to upgrade our robots to the tier we're at now is really only this, so it wasn't that big. And I suppose we can take a look at this and see that the construction time is essentially half a second, and these parts are 4 seconds. And the ones that came before it, the construction time was half a second and 3 seconds for the parts, so it's not that much different. But, ooh, are we at like 80-85% of all the technology researched? Getting closer. So I'm guessing we probably won't really need the tier 8 modules specifically for those, but I think we should have them by the time we're building rocket parts, because that's when the efficiency is really going to start to matter. Yeah, for now, this seems pretty good. This is pretty much everything that isn't robots or our tier 8 modules. And after we have those two things, we'll be able to dive into gold science, which will get us all of our rocket technologies and within reach of the end of the game. But that's going to have to wait until next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.